In this video, we're going to talk about path-like structures. But before that, think about the following scenario. Let's say that I wanted to write a build.xml file that's going to help me compile a Java file as well as run it. So for this purpose, I've created this Java file, and all it does is it's going to help us print a very simple message, hello world, on the standard output. So I've used the system.out.println instruction to do so. Very simple program. And here is our XML file that does a couple of tasks. One is to compile and the other is to run. The target run is the default one, but it depends on the compile target. So this will get executed first. Inside the compile target, we have this task javac. The javac task will help us compile a Java program, and it's going to accept the following attributes, one of which is going to let us specify the Java file that we want to compile. We can also specify the destination directory where the resulting .class file should reside. In our case, it's going to be the same directory. So once this task gets executed, we'll have a .class file residing in the same directory, and then the control comes into this target to run that class file by using this task, Java. And we specified the name of the class, just as you see here. Now let's try to run this file and see if we get any error. We're going to get an error. Compilation is successful, but we have an error here because it says class not found exception. So what's going on? Well, Ant is aware of where the Java is installed and where the standard libraries are residing. So it is comfortably able to compile the source file, but it cannot run it because the .class file is residing in this folder, which Ant is not aware of. So we need to tell it explicitly where this class file is residing. So guess what? We need to give the class path, just as you see here. So this is the tag that we're going to use, within which we can specify a path element, and we can give the path. In our case, the .class file is residing in the same directory, and so it's going to be a dot. Now let's see if things will work. Sure enough, we have this message displayed, hello world. Now in case if your Java file is using any external libraries that are not part of standard Java libraries, then you'll have to provide class path here as well, just as you did here. But in this case, we don't need one, as we're just simply using the Java standard library, so we're good. But here is what we need to note, the class path. So this is just to show an example how a path is used within a task. We could have many more other tasks which may need a path like this. Now in this case, we just have one .class file, and so we can just get away with this simple statement. But in real-time projects, this class path may get a little complex. So let me show you various ways you can define a class path. I've created this document. You can take a look at it. So here is one way to define a class path. I'm using the path element along with the attribute location, and this location points to an external jar file, which means we're going to use all the .class files residing in this jar file. Alternatively, you can also specify the same like this. You can directly copy this attribute to the class path tag, and similarly you can also give a location of a path where you may be having multiple jar files and .class files mixed together. So in here I've specified this property, and whose value is going to point to the directory of the class path, and I'm referring to this particular property in here. Take a note that this time the attribute is path, not the location. And alternatively, you can also make this attribute part of the class path tag itself, like you see here. You can also specify a class path by including a set of files, and for that you're going to use this type file set. Again, more on types at later point of time, but what this means is we wanted to include all the .jar files residing in the lib directory, regardless of if the jar file is residing in a subdirectory or not. We're going to include all the jar files inside the lib directory, and we're going to consider them in our task. Now you may ask me what's the difference between using the file set versus a path. Well, when you specify a path like this is as good as specifying this path inside the system path variable. But whereas here we're telling Ant to take a look at all the jar files under a specific directory. You're also going to get more control on what kind of files that you want to consider. Whereas in here, that's not the case. You would give a path to a folder or a directory, and it's going to be considered as a system path variable. Well, more or less. Similarly, we have another type, dir set, which will let us include a directory versus files. So in here, we wanted to include everything that is residing inside this directory, classes directory. And in fact, you can also use this tag exclude to tell Ant what are all the files that you don't want to consider as part of a class path. And note that this path is actually relative to the path or the directory that you specify in here. You can combine all these and specify a single class path, just as we did here. So you're going to include a path, a set of files, a location, as well as set of directories, etc. And together we form a class path. We can specify this class path as part of a task, like for example Java-C or Java task. And finally, if you want to use a class path in multiple tasks, for example, if you go back, let's say I wanted to use the same class path here as well, then you don't have to copy it everywhere you need it. You can just simply make it part of this path tag and give it some ID so that you can include class path by referencing to that ID. So this statement in here is equivalent to creating a class path like this, but the content inside it would be this. We're actually going to take an example on writing the build.xml for our project. Thereby we're going to combine everything what we've learned so far, and then you'll get a better picture. Alright, I guess that's it on this video. See you soon.